Hello, welcome to another Looney Tunes review video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe to follow my journey to review all 1000 classic Looney Tunes shorts and give this video a like as well. So this is a review for Stage Fright, released in 1940. It's the 301st in the series and it's directed by Chuck Jones. You can find this beautiful restoration on the Mr. and Mrs. Smith Blu-ray. And funnily enough, that film was directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and the name of this short, Stage Fright, is also the name of another Hitchcock film, so it's kind of a weird coincidence there. And it's been around on streaming, it's been fully restored, but it's not on one of the main Looney Tunes sets yet, at least at the time of this recording. And despite what you may feel about this short, you can't deny that it looks great. It is under copyright, can't show you the full thing here on YouTube, otherwise the video just gets blocked. So in case you haven't seen this one, it is just your typical Two Curious Puppies short. They chase each other into a vaudeville theater where everyone seems to have gone home, and they encounter all sorts of things like magician props and an angry looking bird, among other things, and we'll definitely go through it. Nothing too deep here, and I will go through a few things as to why that would be the case here. So this is the fourth Two Curious Puppies short. There was 6 made, and this was within what I like to call the first wave, if you will, of Chuck Jones creations, where he had Sniffles, these Two Curious Puppies, and Inky. They would eventually be retired and replaced by what I call the second generation, which would include the Frisky Puppy, Charlie Dog, the Three Bears, Pepe Le Pew, which would go on to be one of his most famous creations. But we're during a period of time where he creates these characters, but none of them really take off. And we're also at that period of time where Chuck Jones is transitioning slowly away from his Disney phase over to the Chuck Jones that we all know and love. So as you watch this short, you'll notice that the pacing is rather on the slower side, and there's definitely pantomime. Lots and lots of pantomime. Is it necessarily a bad thing? No. But when you're more familiar with Chuck Jones's later works, it can be a little bit of a drag to watch this. But there is one character here, this angry looking bird, that comes around for a few gags, and it's interesting because people might look at it and go, oh, that's Henry Hawk. Well, no, it's not really Henry Hawk. It's not even a prototype Henry Hawk, it's just a bird that's used for gags. But this design, which I believe was done by Bob Givens, was reused for Henry Hawk later on. But I can see how people can look at this character and think it's Henry Hawk. And maybe Chuck, after doing this short, put in the back of his mind that, hey, he liked the attitude of this bird, because Henry Hawk's got a similar attitude, and decided to do that. And then later on, Mick Kimpson would use Henry Hawk in Foghorn Leghorn shorts, and the rest is history. Oh, and he becomes a comic book star too. We can't forget about that. So what we're going to do is go through the short from start to finish, and go through my observations and things that I want to just point out. I don't foresee this one being a long review, because it's not really a short of note, per se, but I'm covering all 1,000 of them, and this is one of them, so let's get to it. Oh, and sadly, this is one of those shorts where at the time of this recording, the original titles have been presumed to be lost. Hopefully one day they'll be found. Although the ending titles have been found, so I guess that's something, but all that matters is the tune, of course, but it would be nice if we could have the shorts looking like they did when they first came out. In any case. Well, we start off with the two dogs fighting over something. I mean, these two dogs seem to be friends at times and enemies at others. Nothing wrong with that. To be fair, they are fighting over a bone, so what dogs wouldn't fight over some food, right? And you can't deny, at least this short looks good. I know I mentioned the restoration looking good, but the short just looks good, period. And it reminds me of a Pluto short, if I'm being totally honest. I don't know if that's Chuck's intention to do his own version of a Pluto short with these characters, but they definitely look familiar. I would argue that the Pluto shorts look a lot more Polish, but then again, Disney's Disney. The so-called Disney style was refined over, well, a decade now by this point, whereas Chuck took on the director's chair only for a few years by this point, and he's still figuring things out. But it's also notable to see that Jones must really love his dogs, and he must really love the idea of seeing how dogs actually move, how they act, because later on, as I already mentioned, he introduces other characters later, like Charlie Dog and Frisky Puppy, both doing different things with the idea of dogs. And later still, he would do Mark Antony, another dog, and that's another approach. So he must have really been a real dog lover, right? So that's why this short's less ha-ha funny and more interesting curio to see how Chuck was observing how dogs move and how they should be animated in cartoons. So it's a bit of a chase, and at least this short starts off on a faster note rather than taking its sweet time getting things ready. So they're in this vaudeville show, and they go past the seal who, again, this is, I think, Chuck learning how to tell a story here. The seal is looking on breaking the fourth wall where it's like, yep, I'm going to do something in this short. What it is, you'll just have to wait and find out. And the dogs end up knocking over a magician's hat. Why is the hat still there? Maybe it's just there being prepared for the next morning's show. I don't know. And we see our Not Henry. I don't know what name to give him, this bird. I'll call him Not Henry because, again, he reminds me of Henry even though it's not. But I like his attitude. Just the drawings in here, just showing off just his attitude of the whole thing, being pissed off that he's disturbed. I'm assuming that his home is inside that hat. Maybe things fell over in there. I don't know. He comes out. You think he's going to give the bone, but no, he just decides, you guys are jerks. I'm going to throw this bone away. And he goes off to the hat. And if you haven't seen this short before, you might think that this gag is it, but no, it sets up quite a few gags, and I love the music cue that's playing there. As far as I'm aware, there's only one music cue, that's Three Jolly Brothers, and if so, I love when Carl Stalling does original stuff. As much as I love musical puns, I actually do love a lot of his original compositions as well. So the dogs see the bone, and again, they chase after it, and they manage to get that bone onto an aerial rope. So this is not only a vaudeville show, it looks like it's also a bit of a circus. And I will give Chuck credit as well. Compare this Two Curious Puppies short with his first one, his timing's definitely improved, and things are getting a little bit more snappier. Sure, it's not as snappy as his later work, but still, it's nice to see him grow and develop as an artist. So they're both on the tightrope, and naturally we're going to see some gags revolving around the two dogs trying to get this bone off the rope. And I love the contrasting animation between the two dogs. So you've got this big dog who's struggling to walk on this rope, and he gets to the bone, but then you got the little puppy that's just walking along, just all casually. But a good place to slow-mo for this one is the big dog actually losing balance and then falling onto that seesaw there. And while the Coyote and Roadrunner series was definitely just less than a decade away, again, you can just imagine that Jones was storing ideas like this in the back of his mind, because you can clearly see something like this being similar to something that the Coyote would do against the Roadrunner later on. So the bone gets thrown up in the air and lands into the pool, which, as we saw, there's a seal in there. And again, we get another bit with the seesaw, which could very much be something that you'd see in a Coyote short later on. So the little dog falls down. How it's not injured, no, but it falls down on the seesaw and brings the big dog back up onto the tightrope. And again, wonderful animation of the big dog being absolutely terrified, trying to keep balance on it. Though in the next bit, you see the little dog going up to the actual swimming pool, diving in, and looks like it's grabbed the bone, but when he comes out of the water, it's a fish. But if you look very closely in the shot beforehand, it's clearly a bone there, so it's an interesting little touch there. And the look on the puppy's face when he realizes he has a fish in his mouth and just drops it. You know, this short isn't exactly ha-ha funny, but it's moments like that that do give me a chuckle. So now we get a whole scene where it's a playful moment of a bone appearing, floating seemingly up on its own, but we all know that there's a seal in there, and the seal thinks it's all fun and games. The puppy means business, even going to the ground trying to get this bone, but the seal just wants to play. I guess it's kind of lonely. Again, is this ha-ha funny? Not really, but it's interesting seeing these characters interact with one another, and that's clearly what Chuck Jones was going for. So the big dog had managed to come down and starts to run over, but not before knocking over the magician's hat once again, and we all know what to expect. The little bird comes out, looking all pissed off, and again, I love these moments. It's probably my favorite moment. In fact, you know what? It is my favorite moment, where this bird just comes out, not happy that his home is disturbed. And I just like how he walks up to the big dog, pushes up his jaw, looking all tough, and then just walking back in. And the music cue accompanying that is fantastic as well. But clearly we're setting up a punchline with that. So the big dog continues on, notices the little puppy, goes back, but then there's a little bit of a mirror image type gag with this seal. I think that could have gone on a little bit longer, actually, the mirror image part, but that's okay. He realizes it's a seal, and the seal just spits water at him. And again, I think the seal is just a lonely little character just wants to play with these dogs. But in a bit that's quite clever, actually. You have the seal throwing a fish at the dog. Clearly, he's not a fish-eating dog. I mean, I know some dogs like fish, but these dogs clearly don't. But then you got the bit where the seal throws the bone to the dog, but in a psychological type gag, the dog just throws it out and then realizes, wait a minute, that's what I actually wanted. And uh-oh, the bone lands in the hat. What is this little bird going to do now? The dog lifts up that bone and we see at the end, again, the bird's very pissed off. He's not liking what's going on. Now, I have been critical of Jones sometimes taking a long time to set up a gag in these earlier shorts, but here it actually works pretty well. So we see the bird just long enough to see that, yep, he's not happy. He gets up and actually takes a while for him to prepare to do something. We don't know what. Now, he ends up just hitting him a little bit and then going back and sitting down, right? But that build-up, that wind-up, you can tell that Jones is definitely learning more about timing, and I definitely got a chuckle out of that. Then we see a brief scene where the little dog is played with by the seal. Again, the seal is very lonely, and we see that the dog is just tumbled around, and that's that. And we cut back to the dog and the bird, and the dog looks very confused, and I guess you would be too if you were in that situation, right? And the bird, for some reason, doesn't want to let this big dog actually grab the bone. So, again, we're not sure what this bird's going to do, so the bird just ends up walking towards the dog, but I don't know why this dog's so afraid of this bird. He could probably squish him with his big paw, but anyway. So the big dog ends up falling back into the water and, well, the little bird goes back into its hat. So we're not going to get a rule of 3 here, where it looks like we're going to get a rule of 4. But the little dog is thrown out and the big dog is being played with, and we get an extended scene of the little puppy being all drunk looking. Well, it's not really drunk, but we're definitely going to get a scene of him appearing to be drunk in any case. And I love the score, which I think is an original cue by Starling here, of this little puppy just staggering around. It actually sounds very familiar to the Pink Elephants theme from Calling Dr. Porky. It's not quite the same, but it's a very similar sort of thing. But the little puppy notices the bone on the floor. Then we get an extended scene where the dog is trying to grab this bone, but is clearly well, of course, not drunk, but is clearly out of it. And yeah, this scene definitely takes a bit too long, and this is the sort of thing that Jones was doing around this time that he would eventually learn from and get away from. So it's probably the worst part of the short, because you got all this build up and it leads to really nothing when it cuts to the next scene, which is a shame because a lot more could have been done here. But is it a big deal? Not really. But the big dog is thrown out by this seal, who also decides to spray some water on him. Again, the seal just wants to play with him. We all know that by now. But he then sees the little puppy finally grabbing onto the bone. And we end with our 4th and final bit with the bird, where he comes out, is like, you know what, guys? Just split this damn bone in half, each have a half, and you're done. And we finish up right there. So the dogs get their bone, and hopefully this bird can finally go to sleep, and we end right there. Again, this is more interesting as a curio, an exploration of where Chuck Jones was around this time, as he was slowly transitioning from his Disney period to the Chuck Jones we all know and love later on. The short is entertaining, but it's not something that I would revisit constantly or anything like that. In fact, the last time I saw it was when I did the original audio commentary on this channel before I had to take that down. So that just shows how interesting this short is, but I didn't mind revisiting it. The best part is clearly that bird, and I'm telling you, Jones must have kept that in the back of his mind when he was doing the shorts involving Henry Hawk. This one gets, I don't know, 5.5 out of 10. It's fine. It's tame, but it's okay for what it is. But that will do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, take care.
Thank you.